brother, wait. When I am alone, when I have no one to scare, I get very frightened myself. The crows could...
Hello, I'm Gus from Askewed Reviews, and it's Saturday, which means that it's a new episode of Cinema Society Saturday. Now, if you haven't heard of that before, this is where a group of us content creators who love horror movies have all come together. Each week, we are then randomly given a theme. We then partner up, give our partner a movie that fits within the theme, and then we will review those films for all of you. Now, if you couldn't figure it out from the intro, the theme for this week is phobias. And to be more specific, this time around we had to give our partners a movie that specifically involved some sort of fear or phobia that we have. Now, speaking of partners, I was actually lucky enough this week to have two of them. And my first one just so happens to be Billy Jack. If you're not already following Billy the Horror Ninja, you definitely need to go and do so. He has some really fantastic content, not just about horror movies, but about music as well, as it's another big passion for him. For this week's theme, Billy gave me the film of The Changeling from 1980, directed by Peter Medak. So, for quite some time, this was actually a movie that I kept thinking that I had actually seen before, but I was just mixing it up with other movies. So, I finally got to watch this one, and I'm glad I did, because it's definitely, at least in my opinion, a classic 80s horror that should be viewed at least once. So, the beginning of this film starts off with a huge tragedy, as our main character of John Russell is traveling with his wife and his child. Now, unfortunately, their car breaks down, and as John walks over to use a payphone, his wife and his child are just playing and having fun. But a car comes around, almost gets hit by a truck, but the truck instead moves out of the way and plows over his family. There's then a little bit of a time jump, not sure exactly how long, but probably a few months. And at this point, John is now trying to not necessarily move on, but find a new home, because understandably, there's probably a lot of pain associated with his current one. Now, he ends up making friends with a woman named Claire Norman, who is part of the Historical Society. And she manages to find him a home that is going to be much less expensive than if he was to purchase a new one. Now, this is a huge mansion or manor. I don't know why he decided that that's what he needed to move into with, you know, dealing with the loss of his family. Oh, yes, let's buy a huge place that's super empty and no one is around to keep me company. Now, while living in his new home, John ends up discovering some very creepy and supernatural things are happening all around him. And due to some help from Claire, he ends up finding out that there was a horrific incident that occurred at his home involving a young boy named Joseph. Now, whether it's due to the tragedy that he went through or just trying to do the right thing, John does try to see if he can find out what actually happened to Joseph and if there's any way of kind of helping this spirit or whatever it is to perhaps move on or get some clarity of the situation. So, will John be able to uncover the mystery of his new home, or will he realize that some things should be left hidden? So, when it came to this film, I did feel a bit divided. On one hand, I really did enjoy the atmosphere, the look of the movie, and especially some of the special effects. Also, the performances were not bad either. Now, on the other hand, though, this movie, which is almost 2 hours long, did feel very long and very just stretched out. There was a lot of times where they probably could have cut out certain scenes or sequences, and it would have made this, at least in my opinion, a bit more digestible. Another thing I do want to mention is the title of the film. It's called The Changeling, which is not a bad title. It's just I feel like because they don't give a description of this in the movie, and it's only just mentioned very briefly that one character is the changeling. that unless you know enough about Fey creatures or Fey lore, that it may not make any sense to you or it might just seem a bit confusing. One thing I do want to mention that I did appreciate a lot with this film, and I really like it when they do this in horror movies in general, is the fact that John pretty much instantly understands that there's a ghost in his house. There's no kind of, I wonder what that noise could be, and wow, this is really strange, but clearly it couldn't be anything supernatural. I like it so much more when someone just gets right on board with what's happening and it's like, okay, how do we solve this issue? So even though this movie is a slow burn, I do still recommend checking it out. For me, on my scale, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. And you can find it to watch for free on Tubi if you wanted to check it out. And once more, I am going to mention you should definitely go and start following Billy. Let's see if we can get him up to 8,000 followers. And another great reason to check out his content is to see the movie that I gave him to review. And that would be the 2022 film Fall. I hope you enjoyed my review of The Changeling, and if you'd like to see what everyone else in the group did for their phobia reviews, just look up the hashtag Cinema Society Saturday.